This is Duke University.
Hello and welcome to Tell Me More About Synthetic Biology, where we will be myth-busting some things about the field of synthetic bio today. Yes, my name is Michael Rudisil. Feel free to call me Rudi. I'm an assistant director in the Career Center, helping to manage the healthcare and biomedical science communities. Joining me is my colleague, Lauren Corey, who is a career advisor and helps to manage the data science and engineering community at the Career Center. Also, our special guest is the assistant professor of the practice in the biomedical engineering program here at Duke. His name is Dr. Cameron Kim. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Kim.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
So, to begin with, tell us a little about yourself. You know, the typical introduction for any type of interview.
Yeah, so I'm a assistant professor of the practice. I've been here at Duke now for 3 years, but I also was a Duke alum. I graduated in 2014 from the biomedical engineering and math. So it's been really exciting to be back, actually, and especially to see a lot of the growth in the area surrounding biotechnology, synthetic biology, and the opportunities that our students have at all levels. So it's been really fun to be back, and I really just am excited to be, in this community again.
Awesome. And Dr. Kim, if you could just tell us a little bit about your work and what kind of students you support at Duke, as well as what you've learned about the synthetic bio industry, and, tell us about your experience as a professor of the practice.
Yeah, so I also serve as the Associate Director for Undergrad Studies here in the BME program, and so I get to work with all of our undergraduate students to pursue really any of their career interest in this space. So we have a lot of students that are interested in medical career paths, and I get to support them through their journey to see what it takes to, go apply for this process. We also work a lot with our graduate students, and as a Ph.D., and I went to my grad school program being able to support students through their letters of rec and through just, talking them through what it's like to be a Ph.D. But one of the things that I also get to work with these students is, well, what do you want to do with this, right? What does this degree look like for you? How do you envision your future path? And the reality is that for many of our students, they're still figuring it out, and I find that this time as an undergraduate, and even really as a Ph.D. student, is a chance for you to explore the field, explore the paths that you might find. We have students who want to go into entrepreneurial endeavors and maybe lead companies or work with others to start companies. We have folks that are really interested in creating brand new biotechnologies or really seeing where the potential of synthetic biology can take them. And so I get to talk to them through this process. And I've learned a lot, especially when, you get to that one student that says, well, I'm not sure how to get into this space yet. I'm not sure how to start off. And we start talking about their research or maybe an internship or a company that they've heard of. And the beauty about this area around Duke and a lot of our alumni connections is that we have a lot of people that want to support you directly into this space. And trying to give the entryway, I think, for the students is probably the most critical part of my job here, and to also work with different industry partners in the RTP area as well as even globally, to say we have these amazing students across not just biomedical engineering, but also in biology, in chemistry, in physics, in even electrical engineering that want to pursue these synthetic biology careers. And I get to talk them through the process. And that's been fun. And I've learned a lot, at least when I talk to these different stakeholders.
Excellent. And I think when we talk about higher education, we talk about beginning as a first-year student, going all the way to PhD programs. One of the things we talk about is it being a roller coaster. There's many ups and downs in what you're doing, and there are things that are going to surprise you. So whether it be from your own experience, whether it be anecdotal from a student that they've told you, what has been something that has been surprising through the journey, particularly in this field, that has turned out positive?
I'll just speak from my own experience because I dealt with my own roller coasters when I was a PhD student. And even as an undergrad, I came in at a time where people didn't say the word CRISPR, or people didn't know about the word CRISPR. And now here we are, 11 years later from sort of the big publications, and it's the only word you can get people to say when they think about synthetic biology. I came in pre-CRISPR, BC, as I like to call it, and I've gotten to see how fast technology changes in this space. And part of what I think when students are trying to understand what does their path look like, the reality is the technologies that are coming out today might not be the same technologies you use in 5 years. And I always sort of make this joke, I guess, is that the job that our first year students, they're coming in, say, in the class of 2024, and so their first job in 2028, 2029, that job might not exist today. They might not even know about what that job looks like. And part of what I think is the most critical part about this degree or this process here at Duke is to develop not just some skills. Certainly you're going to get a lot of skills in any program that you take, whether it's research, wet lab, maybe computational, dry lab skills, but it's also about the curiosities of the world around you. How do you take in information about these new advances in the biotechnology space? What are the tools that we have, and how do those tools get better and better? Or maybe you have an idea to make one of those tools better. There's no one set of skills. There's no one pathway to do this. And I dealt with this a lot in my PhD career. I started off my PhD thinking I was going to start a research lab and I was going to create the next CRISPR, I guess was kind of the way that I envisioned it a little bit. But soon on, I learned about the cellular agriculture industry, or the fake meat, the alternative meat industry, I guess is what they call themselves now. But I learned about how synthetic biology can be used for environmental good and environmental benefit. And that's been something I really want to share with others. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I've actually still maintained a lot of those industry connections to this day. I've learned about the computational protein folding space, AlphaFold. These are all things that are also words that nobody said 5 years ago that now it's the only word you can get people to say. So I think what I really try to impress upon students when they come in, say, day one, and they say, I'm really interested in these synthetic biology careers, like, what do I need to do? And I sort of just tell them to be curious and to be open-minded. And the skills that you find that excite you will come, and we'll work on ways as part of our training to get you there. But the hardest thing to train is your excitement and curiosity for the space.
Dr. Kim, you've talked about how there's no one pathway, and that there's several, there's a trend of emerging careers, new and emerging careers, with these advances in synthetic biology. And, thinking about that, what are some, typical, if you had to think about typical pathways that, people typically pursue within this field?
So I would say that there's the typical pathway with an undergraduate degree in, say, biomedical engineering or biology or chemistry. These are fairly, a lot of our students get those degrees, and you learn a lot of the skills, you learn a lot of the techniques, you learn a lot of the excitement for the space. That's something that will prepare you. We do our best to prepare you for the wide breadth of biological knowledge or chemical knowledge that you need to succeed in an industry space such as synthetic biology, which is on its own right so diverse. But I do think that the students who really take advantage of all of the different multidisciplinary elements of Duke and programs, say like Bass Connections or different, not even a research program. Certainly our students are excellent in research, but there's so many different service learning opportunities to share and educate others about biology. Those students, I find, succeed in sort of landing that job because they can speak to the different people in a room. I think what might be different in a synthetic biology career when you maybe go for an interview with somebody is that you might not be certain who you're talking to. There are certain industries that if you're going to get a job in, I'm just going to say computer science, the chances are you're talking to a computer scientist. That's probably what's going to happen. But in the biotech and this the biology space, you might be also across the room from a computer scientist talking to you about a wet lab protein engineering project. You might be talking next to a mechanical engineer who did some biomaterials work, and you might be sitting next to somebody who has a pure comp sci degree at the same interview table. And the beauty of this space is the fact that all of these skill sets come together into something really beautiful. So I would also say sort of a maybe less traditional path would be to broaden the horizon and say that there's no one right pathway or no one right answer in this space. And yeah, what can you do to expand your horizons and increase your curiosity? That might be being a biomedical engineer that takes a additional computer science class, or it might be a computer science student saying, I'm going to take an extra biology class or two to learn more about how do my skills come into play here. But I definitely would tell students who are interested that, getting some hands-on experience would be really great. I think we're working on many ways here within our different labs, between the biology department, between biomedical engineering. Also, different Bass Connections projects that I've seen and been a part of, including one that I run, has been really important to bridge those skills. So really all of those kind of come together. There's no one immediate answer, though. I think it really comes down to how do you absorb information in this space?
Yeah, and from absorption of information to exploring options and thinking through those next steps, it never fails. There's someone that comes into the space and says, synthetic bio, yeah, R&D, wet bench, no, none of these things are for me. What do I do? And you touched on how you might advise a little bit, but dive a little bit further, and I'm going to add an additional part. I'm actually going to even jump into our next question from that. What are some of the biggest misconceptions? Because I think those tie in, really.
They do. I do think that the research and development path is a very popular one. There's a lot of research and development to be done in the space. We certainly need to be thinking about creative solutions. But I think one of the biggest misconceptions, first of all, is just that it's all medicine. It's all very human health oriented. And the reality is there's amazing projects going on in environmental remediation or environmental engineering work. These biomaterials that people are creating using synthetic biology, from mushrooms to different types of plants, that's kind of a mechanical engineering project too. And that's actually maybe even more of a tinkering kind of building kind of work. So maybe not be traditional R&D, but it's a little bit of a hybrid. And I don't think that research or especially industry work isn't fully R&D. I do think you have to explore ways that we actually build these technologies. But there are careers that are honestly purely computational. And we have a lot of interest in the use of programs like Rosetta and AlphaFold for protein folding, and that's very much explored by computer scientists and computer engineers right now. And how do we make these algorithms faster and better and reach new audiences? So we've been really thinking about that in this process, as well as some of the work in manufacturing. In order for these new cell therapies or gene therapies to become actually viable, we need people to manufacture them and to also get creative with manufacturing. It's not just a standard assembly line of you put this part on and call it a day, but there's a lot of innovation to how to scale this. Do we need these therapies to be in one town, or do we need them all over the place in order to reach our target population or our target patients? So there's work there, but I would also say for those who are interested in maybe seeking a master's or Ph.D. in one of these related fields, there's also amazing work to be done in consulting spaces and life science consulting, and looking at how to due diligence in the space in terms of, hey, is this idea even good? There's a lot of folks in the venture capital world that are looking for bright, excited, and curious bioengineers and synthetic biologists to say, is this a good idea or not? Should I put money into this? And there's a lot of value in that to help support the next generation. But because it's not just medicine, we see work in plant biology. We see work in, again, I mentioned sort of the cell agriculture and the growing of meat. There's certainly medical applications, but there's also ways to degrade all the plastics in our ocean using enzymes. It really doesn't know any bounds. Literally, actually, there's a lot of interesting work right now in what's called astrobiology and trying to figure out how does synthetic biology or how does biology just work in space. And I would also say that these sort of R&D paths or whatever, some of our students maybe are thinking, I don't want to be an engineer, I want to be a scientist. Well, there's a lot of interesting work to be done. And a lot of the tools that we develop in synthetic biology programs and companies are meant to help improve our understanding of the world around us. So there's also opportunities just to take your curiosities and to take these new tools and say, I want to learn something new about biology from this work. And that's something that I think students can really see the diversity of opportunities for this pathway and know that it's not just a one size fits all. Just like there's no one pathway to get in, there's no one path to take down, there's no one standard synthetic biology career. And I think that's the exciting part. And then one last quick thing, actually, is there's a lot of interest right now in science and technology policy. The White House and the Biden administration recently announced a big push in biotech and biomanufacturing. And we have a lot of our interested scientists and public policy students who may want to pursue a career in exploring the future and where does the money go? Where does the policy go? How do we update and improve our infrastructure here in the US? So there's even careers beyond science and engineering. There's careers in government and politics.
When you're thinking about, the field of synthetic bio, you've mentioned, careers in politics and government being, another area of exploration beyond maybe what you typically think about. What other kind of elements within the field are occurring that, people aren't talking, that much about that you wish they were?
I think that there's probably a few paths in not just sort of development and creating new tools. I think, as I mentioned, there's still just a curiosity about the world around us, and we need better ways to study and measure. So I think that students who are still trying to figure out what it is about biology that gets them excited, or they see that there are still some challenges that we haven't addressed. Synthetic biology can be a chance to develop those tools and to work with some amazing scientists. So I think that's one thing that's kind of underlooked, is that a lot of it feels very application driven, but I do think there's the basic sciences of just trying to understand the world around us. Something else that's really interesting, I think, with the synthetic biology community as well is the learning and sort of this sharing of knowledge that goes beyond Duke, the US, sort of the Western world, if you will. There's a lot of interest in how do we share this knowledge with different populations, different stakeholders, different groups. How do we bring biology, which has this potential to treat diseases, cure cancer or address agricultural crises that we're going to face? How do we actually democratize this knowledge? And I think there are people out there who want to see synthetic biologists actually in the field, actually deploying these technologies, not just developing them at a bench or in a lab. So I do think there's some opportunities for outreach in the space as well. And I think there's a lot of interest in even more NGO spaces to work in this. I think another thing that people probably aren't really seeing as maybe a synthetic biology career or seeing it as synthetic biology would be, well, I think medicine is going to be something. The people we have that want to go and just be a doctor, or maybe not be a doctor, but maybe they want to go to get a medical degree. But the reality is a lot of medical professionals are interested in research careers and interested in how to take these inventions and actually treat people. I think that a lot of people think that you either do research or you do medicine, but the reality is they're quite related. And a lot of my students who are interested in this synthetic biology field, but also interested in pursuing a medical practice, I think that they're going to be the ones to lead the future in the space because of the integration of both clinical care and synthetic biology and biological engineering practices. So I think that's something that people also don't necessarily see, that they're not separate paths. I mean, they could be, but they don't have to be. And for students, I think, to sort of kind of create their own adventure around it a little bit, but to say that I'm interested in not just the, development of the technology, but I'm also interested in the deployment and working to treat patients with these new tools. So that's probably the other thing that I think is sometimes missed from the pipeline a little bit, that it's not just one or the other. It's
And with that, I have another question surrounding really the next steps. I think a lot of times when we're working with students, when we're talking with really anybody around career, I know myself asked this question of like, we or at least we think this way. We think 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road of, all right, this is the place I want to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's definitely fruitful in the process itself. But sometimes we need tangible next steps in what we're doing. And so if you were to meet with somebody today who's listened to this conversation, we hope you listen, and you take something away and you pull something and they're like, what are my next steps? What's my next best step that I can do that's a must to be a part of this?
Well, not to just plug, but I would probably start with the Duke Career Center. I do think that there's something about putting the journey together. What has your journey been here at Duke? Because I sometimes, you read a job description, you read the title of whatever it is, and you say, I don't think that's for me, or that's not what I was looking for. But it sometimes takes looking at the whole story. And I think that at the Career Center, you'll get an opportunity to work with one of the counselors and say, well, let's hear about all the things. What gets you excited? Because that, I think, helps to first talk about the story, talk about how do you connect with industry, how do you connect with maybe even research labs or whatever it might be. So I think that's the first starting point. I think the next thing that I would say is to do some diligence and do some of your own research on companies that are maybe here within the Raleigh-Durham area, if you want to stay here for maybe an internship or a first career, or maybe you want to go back home. There's certainly a lot of great places in the country: Cambridge, Massachusetts, San Francisco, San Diego. But there's also a lot of other places that I think people don't always see as burgeoning biotech and synthetic biology hubs. These are areas around Washington, D.C. These are areas in New York. These are areas even in Austin, Texas. These are areas in Colorado, near Golden. There's a lot of places just here in the U.S., and I haven't even talked about the different international locations that exist to get involved. But I would say, see what is available, right? See what, the balance of computational or wet lab work. See what they're looking for in terms of excitement, what they're looking for in terms of creativity. And even if you say, well, I did take that one Python programming class, but I can't call myself a coding expert. But I've done some wet lab work, but I don't know if I can call myself a wet lab expert. Well, that means to me that you should talk to somebody about that and talk to the recruiter or talk to the company and say, well, here's all the things that I'm excited about, and here's all the skills that I want to learn. A lot of the learning that we do is not going to occur in the classroom. It's not even going to occur in the lab. It's going to occur, with different networks of people at a company or at your own lab. And so to build that network, I think, is the third part that I think is so important, is to understand that there's different people in this journey that can help you land that first internship or land that career. And it doesn't have to be just you. It's a whole team effort, and we all want to be part of this. And of course, to speak with the different faculty here at Duke, myself included, that can help to tell you that there are companies down the road, or not even down the road, they're barely across the street, that are doing these crazy and exciting biotech and synthetic biology ventures, and that they're looking for scientists and engineers like you. They're looking for curious minds and maybe some of your crazy ideas, or somebody who can see the whole picture of what's going to happen with this invention. Those are the people that they're looking for. And so how do we tell that story? What can we do together to make that story cohesive? How do we help you put that resume together to highlight those features of yourself? And let's cast a wide net and work with all the different people around here. And I think that students will be very surprised through the sort of 3 to 4 easy steps that there's a lot of people that are interested in them.
When you're thinking about the challenges for students who are interested or maybe not even know they're interested yet, what challenges will students face, or do you think students will face when pursuing opportunities in this field?
I think that the most obvious challenge will be where to start. What does the Google search say in terms of, oh, this is the job that I want? I think that's probably the hardest part. I think that students are also going to often look at a lot of different job postings or different resources, and they'll say things like master's or PhD. And I would say that is, certainly going to help you. And I would say that if that is within your timeline of your career, I think you should definitely go pursue one of them. But because they're looking for somebody with a master's and a PhD, I think they're also looking for somebody with a bachelor's degree. They're looking for people to help start the process. They're looking for people to help start their pipeline, whether it is in manufacturing or R&D or in maybe more consulting roles. They're looking for people that they can train and work with. So the first hurdle, I think, might be seeing, oh, it's only for masters or higher. And it's like, well, that might be what that job posting says. But that doesn't mean that there aren't two other jobs that are also for, bachelor students or interns as well, right? So that's the first, I think, hurdle that students will probably face in this process. I think the other thing to say is that these jobs might look like they're looking for one particular skill set, or they're looking for one sector or one area of development. And that might be true at the start. They might be saying we need somebody, or we want people to help in assay development or in studying this particular molecule that we've developed. And that's probably a good starting point. But what I know about this space is that it's pretty quick. And so the flexibility, the ability to adapt and be a part of multiple teams and multiple projects, or to take your curiosities to a different group, I think is really valued. And I think that these companies will also look for that. So I think the other thing that I would say that might be a hurdle is to don't put all of your eggs into one basket of skills. Share all of the skills that you have, because that's what these companies are looking for. They're looking for people that they can, bring all over the place, right? Like I mentioned at the beginning, synthetic biology is not a single path. It's all of these different things, from wet lab and pipetting and protein engineering and growing cells, but it's also computational, it's data analysis, it's statistics, it's also curiosity. There's a little bit of economics because you got to pay for everything. There's all these different pieces. It's not just do one job. It's all these things that I think that the companies are valuing, people that have a broad expanse, and that truly your breadth of knowledge that you have, from cellular, molecular, to anatomy, to plants, to the brain, to cardio, whatever it might be, those are valued skills. You don't need to be solely focused on one thing. So even if the job description says only one thing, I would push back against that, because I don't think that's the reality.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the toughest thing to communicate, is keep pushing through, keep asking questions, keep working with different employers. And speaking of employers, you mentioned a lot. You've mentioned a ton internationally, but let's bring it back down to Durham, where we are located, the RTP area. What are some of the companies that you've talked to that are emerging in the area, that are local, that are homegrown? Tell us a little bit more about that.
There's a lot of excitement going on here in the RTP area. We're set up to be one of the largest biotech and biomanufacturing hubs in the country. We're set up with companies that want to bring not just their manufacturing, but also their research and development pipelines here. We're seeing a lot more that these are becoming co-localized, not separate, because the reality is, in order for us to make these new technologies and new products, we need to also innovate in that process. And so we're seeing a lot of that come in. One company in particular, Biogen, is working on their gene therapy manufacturing and innovation unit here, and that's set up, I think, for the next couple of years to be online. And that's going to be a massive facility. That's going to be something that shows that not only is this gene therapy field in the applications of synthetic biology to gene therapy, not only is that something that we can do in a lab, but we can also do at massive scale to treat neurological diseases. There's companies like Fujifilm Diosynth who are leading in the biotechnology, the biomanufacturing, leading in not just the production of elements of, say, the COVID-19 vaccines, but also leading in sort of an integration of optics as well as medicine and synthetic biology. And again, speaking to the fact that it's not just one pathway that you're going to need in order to succeed in the space. And they are sort of leading the charge here. But I'm also really excited about a lot of the different companies, startups, even spun out here by our own Duke faculty, that are really becoming the next innovation. I can speak to a couple that are just down the street in the Chesterfield, or just down the street in the biolabs, that are right here and looking for excited scientists. These are leading the ways for better methods of making these viral vectors, like Isolair Bio. This is also gene therapy and bacterial immunity, or looking at ways to treat infections from Locus Therapeutics. That's just down the street as well. And these are all companies started out of technologies and faculty here at Duke. So we have this network here. Let's take advantage of it. And I think that we're always excited to bring in our Duke engineers and our Duke scientists on board, because we, we know how well we're trained. We know what excites us. We know how to get really moving on these technologies. And I think that they're right down the streets. Don't have to go far to find them.
You've mentioned the breadth of opportunities and the variety of those opportunities, as well as employers. When you're thinking about the different types of degrees that people hold in this field, what are they? And how would you recommend them market their skills?
All of these degrees are all over the place. I'd be hard pressed to find one company that doesn't have like 10 to 20. I feel like it's all over the place. I know people that have been in the biotech and synthetic biology company space that have public policy degrees, that are leading companies or leading efforts in both science communication and fundraising and innovation. I know people who have chemistry degrees that see some of the advanced chemistry in these spaces, and they get to be a part of that, bring their knowledge to the team. I know people that have engineering degrees, of course, biomedical engineering, bioengineering degrees, chemical engineering degrees. I also know a lot of computer scientists in this space. I know people with biology degrees. I know people with microbiology PhDs. I know people with MBAs. I know people with... It's really all over the place. There's no one degree that's going to lock you in for life into a synthetic biology career, nor do we really want, I think, one degree coming into these spaces. These are so multifaceted programs that we need to factor in everybody into this program, and into the research, into the development, into the policy, into how we get this technology there. So there's no, I really can't think of even one degree that I'd say, get that one. Because I don't think I know the answer for that one. And I don't know if anybody does. Certainly it's your curiosity. Like, you should, know some biology. You should know some chemistry. You should know some computer science. You should know some physics. You should know some policy. You should kind of know everything. And I think that, especially at a place like Duke, where we have this very wide education available to you, that's the beauty of a liberal arts education, is that you get to learn all these things. That's where the value, I think, really comes in pursuing a synthetic biology career, because you're going to get to use all of those classes, all of those late night papers, all of those problem sets, all of those coding assignments. I think they're all going to be really useful for you in a future synthetic biology pipeline.
Thank you so much for your time today. Before we conclude, I do want to ask a little bit of rapid fire questions.
Okay.
So these are short, brief, like just think of them as tweets or something along those lines. Not even be controversial to say tweets, but less than 140 characters.
Okay.
Maybe. And try to give your best response to them. It doesn't have to be perfect. But to begin with, if you had one piece of advice, professional advice, what can you give someone looking to enter this field?
I would say patience. I think that it's always going to be tricky. Someone's always going to look for one thing on a resume. That's not the place you want to work at if you're only looking for one skill. We're looking for, companies and employers that want the whole you. Sometimes you need a little bit of patience for that.
Who can students talk to about this field?
So you can certainly talk to me. I am right here on campus. You can talk to the Duke Career Center. You can talk to any of the various folks in the RTP area, the different biotechnology companies. And I think, fingers crossed, I think we're going to be able to get some of those people to campus here not too far in the future. Excellent.
And have you ever questioned your career path?
I love teaching. I love my job here. So I haven't questioned it in a while. But when I was a PhD student, I went through all the careers. I went from going to med school to running a research lab, to cellular agriculture, to computational protein biology, to consulting, to government. I went all over the place. So I love where I'm at right now. I haven't questioned it in a few years, but when I was a PhD student, it was all over the place.
Excellent. And last question, when should students start exploring this pathway?
I think a great time to explore is, maybe a little bit of downtime in the summer, a little bit easier, see what's going on, right? Learn more about the space. I think the fall, is a great time to really start to see who's interested in internships. Sometimes the space can move a little bit fast, and so sometimes some of these opportunities don't always make their way known until maybe early spring. But say maybe, mid-fall, early spring is a great time to be on the lookout for these career paths.
Awesome. And with that, I would like to conclude this conversation by thanking Dr. Cameron Kim for joining us today and for sharing your many insights and experiences surrounding BME and just demystifying careers in synthetic biology. For more information and updates on exploring careers, visit the Career Center website.